Welcome back to Skytech-Lens. In early 2025, the Trump administration stunned the world by announcing steep new tariffs on Canada and Mexico, sending shockwaves through the continent's economic landscape. Practically overnight, the foundations of North American trade, built over decades, were shaken to their core, leaving businesses and governments scrambling for answers. For businesses across the continent, this was more than a policy change. It was a wake-up call. The era of predictable, rules-based trade was suddenly over, replaced by uncertainty and risk. The threat of a 35% tariff wasn't just an economic headache, it was an existential threat to key industries, from auto manufacturing to agriculture, threatening jobs and livelihoods on both sides of the border. Canada and Mexico, long reliant on the vast U.S. market for growth and stability, realized they could no longer afford to simply wait for Washington's mood to shift. They needed to act, and act together. The two countries moved quickly from diplomatic talk to concrete action, forging new agreements and launching joint projects. Their goal, to build a Plan B that would shield their economies from future shocks and reduce their vulnerability. For decades, North American trade flowed north-south, deeply integrating supply chains through the U.S., creating prosperity, but also dependency. But in a world of tariffs and trade barriers, this integration became a liability, exposing businesses to sudden disruption and loss. Canadian and Mexican industries found themselves hostage to U.S. policy decisions, their futures uncertain, and their leaders demanding a new approach to trade and cooperation. The response was not panic, but determination. In boardrooms and government ministries, leaders began planning alternatives to U.S. dependency, exploring new markets and infrastructure. The goal was clear: create leverage and resilience. Not to abandon the U.S., but to ensure future stability by diversifying partnerships and building new connections. The tariff shock had forced a strategic pivot. Canada and Mexico, once content to follow the U.S. lead, were now ready to build on new ground, determined to shape their own economic destiny. After the tariff announcement, Ottawa and Mexico City launched urgent high-level talks. These weren't routine meetings. They focused on building a resilient economic partnership, independent of U.S. politics. The centerpiece, a plan for an energy and trade corridor bypassing U.S. customs territory, using existing and new infrastructure. Linking Canadian energy to Mexico's Pacific ports would allow goods to reach Asia without U.S. interference. Unlike treaties, pipelines and ports are physical facts, long-term commitments immune to political whims. Canada and Mexico coordinated both for future U.S. negotiations and for massive infrastructure investment. Harmonizing regulations and streamlining customs would attract capital and embed their partnership in the continent's landscape. This was a deliberate, strategic effort to rebalance North American power, 1 kilometer of pipeline at a time. The energy corridor is simple in concept, but massive in scale and ambition. It's a vision that stretches from the oil fields and gas wells of Canada all the way to the bustling Pacific ports of Mexico, connecting two nations through a web of infrastructure and opportunity. Canada's new pipelines and LNG terminals finally give it long-sought Pacific access, opening doors to Asian markets and reducing reliance on traditional routes. But routing exports through Mexico's efficient Pacific ports offers even greater strategic advantages, including faster shipping times and access to new trading partners. Shipping Canadian energy to Mexico for processing or transshipment diversifies export routes, builds redundancy, and helps both countries weather global market shifts. This corridor isn't just for oil and gas. Agriculture, potash, and other vital resources can move along these same lines, strengthening trade ties. Manufactured goods, machinery, and technology can follow, making the corridor a true artery for North American commerce. For Mexico, it means becoming a logistics and value-added hub, attracting investment, creating jobs, and boosting its role in global supply chains. The transformation of its ports and trade hubs is reshaping Mexico's role in North America, making it a gateway for goods and energy. The real prize, breaking Canada's historic dependence on U.S. routes and giving it true export flexibility for the first time in decades. The new corridor lets Canada pivot between Atlantic, Pacific, and U.S. markets, giving it options and reducing U.S. leverage over Canadian exports. With more routes open, Canada can respond to global demand shifts and negotiate from a position of strength. It gives Canadian negotiators a stronger hand, secures economic sovereignty, and ensures both countries benefit from shared prosperity. This isn't just a new route, it's the dawn of a new era for Canadian and Mexican trade, built on partnership and innovation. Together, they're building resilience in an uncertain world, forging a future where both nations thrive. Building this corridor requires massive capital. Enter Canada's Maple 8 pension funds. These funds, managing trillions, are global experts in long-term infrastructure investment. Their involvement turns the Canada-Mexico corridor from vision to reality. Pension funds have patient capital, ideal for projects with decades-long horizons. Their track record reassures other investors, lowering financing costs and attracting more capital. The Maple 8's commitment anchors the project, signaling stability amid U.S. policy uncertainty. For Canada, aligning pension fund investment with national strategy is a masterstroke. Pensioners get secure, long-term returns, the country gets critical infrastructure. It's a symbiotic relationship, transforming vulnerability into strategic opportunity. The Canada-Mexico plan is a three-act strategy: survive, diversify, renegotiate. It's a bold response to a shifting global landscape where trade tensions and protectionism threaten economic stability. First, survival, using Mexican facilities for minor processing to legally change a product's origin and sidestep U.S. tariffs. This creative workaround allows goods to keep moving, even as political winds shift. This keeps trade flowing and jobs protected while bigger plans take shape. It's a lifeline for businesses and workers who depend on cross-border commerce. Next, diversification. Building the energy corridor and Pacific routes to reduce dependence on the U.S. and expand into Asia. By investing in new infrastructure, Canada and Mexico are opening doors to global markets. The goal isn't to replace the U.S. market but to rebalance and create options. Diversification means more choices, more partners, and less vulnerability to any single country's policies. If exports have multiple destinations, U.S. tariffs become a manageable problem, not a crisis. It's about building resilience into the system, so shocks can be absorbed. The long-term goal: enter the 2026 USMCA review from a position of strength. With more leverage, Canada and Mexico can negotiate on their own terms. By then, Canada and Mexico aim to have alternative infrastructure and diversified trade in place. These investments are about future-proofing their economies. This changes the negotiation dynamic. They'll have leverage and a credible plan B. The power balance shifts when you have real alternatives. No longer supplicants, they'll be independent partners able to push back on unreasonable U.S. demands. It's a transformation in how North America does business. The three-act plan transforms shared vulnerability into collective strength. It's about building a foundation for long-term prosperity. Their economic destiny will be shaped in Ottawa and Mexico City, not just Washington. Decisions will reflect their own priorities and ambitions. It's a blueprint for resilience in a turbulent era, one that turns uncertainty into opportunity and prepares Canada and Mexico for whatever comes next. The key to tariff avoidance is the rules of origin. What makes a product Canadian, Mexican, or American? Simply shipping Canadian goods through Mexico doesn't change their origin. To avoid U.S. tariffs, products must undergo genuine transformation in Mexico, like refining oil or assembling car parts. This isn't a loophole, but standard trade law. Value-added processing in Mexico turns Canadian raw materials into Mexican products, eligible for USMCA benefits. This incentivizes investment in Mexican manufacturing and secures Canadian producers access to North America. The line between transshipment and transformation is crucial. Businesses need clarity to plan. Legal and regulatory certainty is as important as physical infrastructure. Getting the rules right unlocks the corridor's full economic potential. Uncertainty is poison for investors. Tariff threats from the U.S. have rattled North American markets. The Canada-Mexico initiative offers stability, clear procedures, physical assets, and predictable rules. Markets watch every step. Progress on infrastructure and customs harmonization brings relief. Clarity on rules of origin is vital. It unlocks billions in investment and lets companies build new supply chains. The upcoming 2026 USMCA review is a source of anxiety, but Canada and Mexico's unified strategy preempts chaos. By building alternatives and showing unity, they reduce negotiation drama and market risk. Transparent policies and rule of law build trust, lowering financing costs. The partnership is an island of stability in a sea of uncertainty. It's a lesson for the U.S. markets crave predictability, not volatility. The Canada-Mexico corridor, designed to bypass U.S. tariffs, could ultimately benefit all of North America, including the U.S. Diversified supply chains introduce competition, lower costs, and stabilize prices for everyone. Tariffs are a hidden tax on consumers. Avoiding them keeps prices in check for American buyers too. Efficient routes to global markets boost North American exports and economic output. Building world-class infrastructure requires sound economics, not political whims, benefiting the whole region. U.S. producers could tap into improved Canadian and Mexican networks, making the continent more competitive. A resilient supply chain means more options, stable prices, and less volatility for U.S. businesses. Forced discipline and diversification could lead to a stronger, less inflationary North American economy. Canada and Mexico's pivot forces the U.S. to choose tariffs or treaties. One path is protectionism, tariffs, unpredictability, and zero-sum thinking, which disrupts supply chains and raises costs. The other is rules-based trade, stability, transparency, and shared prosperity. The Canada-Mexico corridor is a direct response to U.S. protectionism, a costly insurance policy against instability. This effort could have been invested in a more integrated U.S.-centric system, if trust had held. Now, the U.S. risks isolation as its partners build alternatives. The choice: keep building walls or lead a stronger, integrated North American market. The world is watching to see which road America will take. Thanks for watching a video and subscribe to the channel now for more updates. Thanks.